The grand chamber of the Galactic Concordat fell silent as the human delegation entered. 7 species representing the most powerful civilizations in the known universe sat in tiered seats that spiraled upward like the inside of a massive nautilus shell, their varied anatomies crystalline, gelatinous, many-limbed, or wrapped in fields of living energy, all turned toward the 5 humans who walked with quiet dignity across the polished floor. Admiral Elena Vasquez led the group, her weathered face betraying none of the fear she felt. Behind her walked Dr. Marcus Reynolds, xenobiologist, Commander Talia Washington, tactical officer, Ambassador Darius Okafor, diplomat, and finally Lyra Kendrick, the Admiral's personal aide, a last-minute addition whose presence had raised eyebrows among the human contingent. "You stand accused of acts of war against the Concordat," rumbled Sovereign Vextalon, the mantis-like chairman whose species had ruled this sector for millennia. "Your primitive weapons have destroyed 3 of our border outposts. We have evidence these were false flag operations," Admiral Vasquez responded, her voice steady. Earth had no involvement. A ripple of what could only be described as alien laughter echoed through the chamber. "The human insists on innocence," hissed Delegate Urian, his translucent tentacles waving dismissively.
How typical of their emotional, irrational species. Indeed,
chimed the crystalline form of Archon Petix, a species that still relies on musical vibrations for entertainment, cannot possibly understand interstellar diplomacy. Lyra Kendrick stepped forward suddenly. Despite Ambassador Okafor's restraining hand, the movement drew every alien eye. "With respect," she said, her voice surprisingly firm, "you misunderstand us." Admiral Vasquez shot her a warning glance. But Lyra continued, "You mock our expressions, our art, our music, as primitive, yet you've never truly experienced them." Sovereign Vexatalon's compound eyes narrowed. "This council has not authorized you to speak. Human." "Then authorize me to sing," Lyra replied, her eyes locked with the towering insectoid ruler. The chamber erupted in clicks, whistles, and electromagnetic pulses, the alien equivalent of shocked murmurs. Humans were known for their unpredictability, but this was unprecedented. "You wish to perform?" Archon Petix asked, crystal facets glinting with what might have been curiosity. "I do," Lyra said. "One song. If afterward you still believe we're responsible for the attacks, we'll accept your judgment." Admiral Vasquez stepped close to Lyra. "What are you doing?" she whispered fiercely. Lyra turned slightly. "Trust me, Admiral. My grandmother was Navajo. She taught me something about sound that the Concordat needs to hear." The Admiral hesitated, then nodded once. She addressed the council. "We request 5 minutes for this demonstration." Sovereign Vextalon consulted silently with the other delegates through their neural network. Finally, he responded with what humans would interpret as amusement. "Very well. You may have your 5 minutes of primitive expression. It will change nothing." Lyra walked to the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing. No human technology accompanied her, no instruments, no enhancements. Just a pure, clear voice that started with a simple Navajo healing song her grandmother had taught her. But as the notes rose and fell, something extraordinary happened. The harmonics of her voice began to interact with the chamber itself, designed by alien architects who had never accounted for the unique properties of human vocalization. The aliens stirred uncomfortably in their seats. Several of the more sensitive species began to tremble. The song seemed to bypass their translation matrices entirely, speaking directly to something more fundamental in their consciousness. And then, as Lyra's voice reached a particularly complex series of notes, the grand holographic display at the center of the chamber flickered and revealed something that had been hidden from view. Images appeared, Concordat ships attacking their own outposts, elaborate plans for a manufactured war against Earth, and the true architect behind it all. "This is impossible," roared Vextalon, rising from his ornate chair. His staff officers rushed to shut down the display, but more images kept appearing with each new note in Lyra's song. The evidence was undeniable. The Concordat's own security feeds showed their ships firing on the outposts, then retreating along vectors that would implicate Earth vessels. Internal communications between Vextalon and several high-ranking military officers outlined the entire deception. Archon Petix's crystalline body vibrated with what humans would recognize as outrage. Sovereign Vextalon, explain this immediately. But Vextalon was already backing away, his compound eyes darting between the exits. Guards of various species moved to block his retreat, their previous alliance forgotten in the face of such betrayal. Lyra's song reached its crescendo, and with it came the final revelation, the reason behind the false flag operation. Resource surveys had discovered that Earth's oceans contained a unique biological compound that could extend the lifespan of Vextalon's species by centuries. The war would have given them the pretext to seize Earth as a conquest prize. As her last note echoed through the chamber, Lyra opened her eyes to find the entire council staring at her in stunned silence. Admiral Vasquez and the human delegation looked equally shocked. "How did you do this?" demanded Delegate Mora, a being composed of luminescent particles that now swirled in agitated patterns. Lyra looked up at the alien representatives, her expression serious. "The mathematical patterns in our music. They resonate with the crystalline architecture of your systems. My grandmother studied your technology when your scout ships first visited Earth. She recognized something your scientists missed. Your data storage responds to specific harmonic frequencies." Ambassador Okafor stepped forward, seeing an opportunity to capitalize on this unexpected turn. "The human delegation requests that these proceedings be adjourned until the Concordat can investigate these revelations properly. Earth has clearly been falsely accused, and we deserve an official apology." Archon Petix floated down from the high council seats, crystal facets reflecting the chamber's light in kaleidoscopic patterns. The being approached Lyra, towering over her yet somehow conveying a sense of respect. "In 10,000 years of Concordat history," the crystalline entity said, "no species has ever revealed such a vulnerability in our systems, nor shown such restraint in exploiting it." The Archon turned to address the full council. "I move that all accusations against Earth be immediately withdrawn, and that Sovereign Vextalon be detained pending a full investigation." A chorus of agreement sounded throughout the chamber, expressed in dozens of alien communication forms. But before the proceedings could continue, a sharp alarm cut through the air. Vextalon had activated some kind of emergency protocol. "You think this ends here?" The insectoid ruler chittered, mandibles clicking rapidly. "Foolish humans. Foolish council." This was merely one move in a much larger game. The chamber's massive doors sealed shut with a resonant boom. External communications went dark. The Concordat's headquarters had entered lockdown, with the entire human delegation and most of the galactic leadership trapped inside. Commander Washington moved to Admiral Vasquez's side, her hand moving subtly to the concealed weapon she'd managed to smuggle past security. "Orders, Admiral?" Vasquez's eyes remained fixed on Vextalon, who was now backing toward a private exit that had opened behind his chair. "Lyra," she said quietly, "can you sing again?" The young woman nodded, understanding immediately what the Admiral was asking. "Different song this time. The one my grandmother called the key." As guards loyal to Vextalon began to pour into the chamber from hidden entrances, Lyra took another deep breath. This time she didn't close her eyes. She needed to watch what was happening, to adjust her notes to the changing situation. The new song began low, almost a whisper, but built quickly into something that seemed to make the very air vibrate. The effects were immediate and dramatic. The chamber's technology, lights, doors, security systems began to respond to her voice as if it were a master control key. Ambassador Okafor understood their advantage wouldn't last long. "We need to secure communications with our ship," he told Vasquez. "If Lyra can open a channel," the Admiral nodded grimly, "and we need to make sure the Council sees the rest of the evidence. This goes beyond a resource grab. Something tells me Vextalon isn't working alone." As Lyra's voice rose and fell in complex patterns, the locked doors began to slide open. The emergency lights shifted from red to normal illumination. And most importantly, the central holographic display activated once more, showing not just the evidence of the false flag operation, but something much more concerning. A massive fleet of unknown origin, gathering just beyond the edge of Concordat space. Dr. Reynolds stared at the display in scientific fascination. "Admiral," he said urgently, "those aren't Concordat ships, and they're not from Earth either." "No," Vasquez agreed, her military experience allowing her to recognize the threat immediately. "Those are war vessels, and they're waiting for something." Lyra's song continued, holding the chamber's systems open against whatever lockdown protocols Vexitalan had activated. But everyone present, human and alien alike, now understood that the false accusations against Earth had been merely the opening move in a much more dangerous game. The real war was. The chamber erupted into chaos as the holographic evidence materialized before everyone's eyes. The displays showed unmistakable footage of concordant ships firing on their own outposts, timestamps perfectly matching the alleged human attacks. Lyra's voice never faltered, though her eyes were now open, witnessing the effect of her song. The harmonics she produced weren't just revealing hidden data. They were somehow bypassing the chamber's security systems, accessing sealed records that had been buried deep within the concordant archives. Sovereign Vexitalan rose to his full height, mandibles clicking furiously. "Stop this immediately," he commanded. But his authority was already crumbling as delegates from all 7 species witnessed the deception unfolding before them. The most damning revelation appeared last. Communications between Vexitalan and the Myriad Collective, a resource-hungry empire at the edge of known space. The plan was clear: fabricate a war with humans, use the conflict to seize Earth's abundant water resources, and share the spoils. As Lyra's song reached its crescendo, the holographic systems throughout the chamber began responding to her voice patterns in ways their designers had never anticipated. It was as if the technology itself recognized something in human vocal expressions that the aliens had dismissed as primitive. Admiral Vasquez stepped forward. "I believe our 5 minutes are up, Sovereign, and it appears the judgment this chamber should be considering has changed." The crystalline form of Archon Petix vibrated with what appeared to be outrage. "How is this possible? The human is controlling our systems with mere sound waves." Dr. Reynolds spoke up, seeing an opportunity to explain. "Humans evolved as pattern recognition specialists. Our music contains mathematical sequences that your technology recognizes as command protocols. You built your systems on universal mathematical principles, the same principles that form the foundation of human music." Delegate Urian's tentacles had stopped their dismissive waving. "The human singing, she is a weapon?" "No," Ambassador Okafor corrected firmly. "She is an artist. There's a difference you might want to consider before deciding whether humans are worthy of respect." Commander Washington had already positioned herself between Lyra and the increasingly agitated Sovereign. Vexitalan, the security drones, floating at the chamber's edges, seemed confused. Their programming conflicted between protecting the Council and responding to the unexpected commands embedded in Lyra's harmonics. "This is unprecedented," declared Delegate Mora of the Collective Consciousness species. "We must recess to consider these revelations." But it was too late for a peaceful adjournment. Sovereign Vexitalan made a sharp gesture, and hidden panels in the chamber wall slid open. Armed guards of his species poured in. This had clearly been planned as a contingency. "The humans will be detained while we investigate this intrusion into confidential records," Vexitalan announced. Admiral Vasquez's hand moved subtly toward the small emergency beacon hidden in her uniform. If activated, it would signal the human fleet waiting at the edge of the system, a fleet the Concordant had not detected. Lyra stepped close to her. "Admiral," she whispered urgently, "I can do more." The song wasn't finished. Vasquez assessed their deteriorating situation with the calm of a veteran commander. The 5 humans were now surrounded by at least 20 armed guards, with more arriving. "Do it," she decided. Lyra nodded and began to sing again, but this time, a different melody. Lower, more resonant, with complex overtones that seemed to vibrate through the very structure of the chamber. The effect was immediate. The security drones faltered, then dropped to the floor. The guards stopped advancing, their neural implants, standard issue for all Concordant military, suddenly malfunctioning. And somewhere deep in the Galactic Concordant's central systems, alarms began to sound. "What is happening?" demanded Archon Petix, crystal structure flashing with urgent pulses of light. "System-wide security breach," reported a technician who had rushed to a control panel. "Something is accessing our defense grids, our communication networks, everything." All eyes turned to Lyra, who continued singing, her voice building in intensity. The holographic displays around the chamber were now showing rapid sequences of data, fleet positions, defense codes, classified intelligence reports from across the galaxy. "Stop her." Vextalon commanded, but none of his guards could move. Their neural implants were completely overwhelmed by the harmonic patterns in Lyra's voice. Dr. Reynolds watched in scientific fascination as the displays changed. She's not just accessing data, he realized. She's creating a feedback loop in their systems. The harmonics in her voice are being amplified by the chamber's architecture, creating a cascading effect throughout the network. Commander Washington had drawn her concealed weapon, though she hadn't yet needed to use it. In plain English, Doctor? She's created a sympathetic resonance, Reynolds explained. Like when a singer breaks a glass with the right note, but on a technological scale. The entire Concordat network is listening to her. Ambassador Okafor seized the diplomatic opportunity. He addressed the council members who were not aligned with Vextalon. Honorable delegates, it's clear that sovereign Vextalon has betrayed not only Earth, but the Concordat itself. We propose an immediate vote to remove him from power and open formal peace negotiations with humanity. Archon Petix's crystalline form had shifted to a deep blue hue that conveyed grave concern. Your proposal has merit, human diplomat, but first we must regain control of our systems. That's not possible while the girl sings, Vextalon snarled. Shoot her! A guard who had managed to override his malfunctioning neural implant raised a weapon toward Lyra. Commander Washington fired first, her concealed blaster hitting the guard with pinpoint accuracy. The chamber descended further into chaos. Some council members fled, others called for order, while Vextalon's loyalists and the remaining council security forces faced off in a tense standoff. Through it all, Lyra kept singing. The displays around the chamber now showed something new, a massive fleet approaching Concordat space. But it wasn't the human fleet. Myriad collective warships, Admiral Vasquez identified, her military training allowing her to recognize the distinctive shapes, hundreds of them. They're on an attack vector. This was always the plan, Dr. Reynolds realized. Start a war between Earth and the Concordat, weaken both sides, then the Myriad collective swoops in to conquer the weakened powers. Delegate Urian's tentacles coiled in alarm. Our defense systems are compromised. We cannot coordinate a response while our networks are disrupted. Lyra's eyes met Admiral Vasquez's, and something unspoken passed between them. The Admiral nodded slightly. The melody changed again. The tempo quickened, the notes became sharper, more precise. The displays around the chamber shifted once more, now showing Concordat defense systems coming back online, but in a new configuration. What is she doing? Archon Petix asked, addressing no one in particular. Saving your civilization, Admiral Vasquez replied simply. And ours. The holographic displays showed Concordat defense platforms reorienting, communications being restored between military units. The song was rebuilding the compromised systems, but with new protocols, ones that couldn't be exploited by Vextalon or his myriad collective allies. Vextalon seemed to realize what was happening. With a chittering cry of rage, he lunged toward Lyra, his natural weapons extended. Ambassador Okafor moved with surprising speed for a diplomat, intercepting the insectoid ruler and grappling with him. Now would be a good time to call in our fleet. Admiral, Okafor grunted as he struggled with the physically superior alien. Vasquez activated her emergency beacon. Within moments, the displays showed new ships appearing at the edge of the system, the human fleet, smaller than the myriad collective armada, but strategically positioned. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of Earth, she announced, both to the chamber and through the communication systems that Lyra's song had opened. I am transmitting tactical data on the approaching myriad collective fleet. Their ships have a resonance vulnerability in their shield harmonics. Targeting data follows. Commander Washington joined Ambassador Okafor in restraining Vextalon, while Dr. Reynolds moved to a control panel, working to stabilize the systems that Lyra's song was. Reconfiguring, the Council cannot accept human military assistance without a formal vote, protested one of the delegates who had remained. Your choice, Vasquez replied bluntly. Vote quickly or be conquered. Archon Petix's crystalline form pulsed rapidly, their equivalent of rapid thought. As acting head of the Council in this emergency, I temporarily accept Earth's military assistance. A formal vote will follow when the crisis is contained. Throughout the chamber, the various alien representatives signaled their agreement, some reluctantly, others with evident relief. Lyra's song was reaching its conclusion. The final notes hung in the air as the display showed Concordat and human ships moving into formation against the approaching myriad collective fleet. When she finally stopped singing, she swayed slightly from exhaustion. Dr. Reynolds caught her before she could fall. "That was impossible," he said, his scientific mind still struggling to understand what he had witnessed. "Not impossible," Lyra replied wearily. "Just forgotten knowledge. My grandmother said the universe speaks in patterns. We just have to learn how to listen and how to respond." "We need to move now," Commander Washington shouted, seizing the moment of confusion. She grabbed Lyra by the elbow, pulling her toward the chamber's eastern exit while the aliens struggled with their malfunctioning technology. Admiral Vasquez and Ambassador Okafor followed close behind, with Dr. Reynolds bringing up the rear, his eyes wide as he witnessed the full effect of Lyra's singing on the alien systems. "The resonance patterns in her voice," he muttered, half to himself. "They're triggering some kind of cascade failure in their neural interfaces." The 5 humans burst through the ornate doors into a curving corridor. The space station that housed the Galactic Concordat headquarters was a marvel of alien engineering, and now, thanks to Lyra, much of it was in disarray. Emergency lights pulsed in sequences that suggested the primary control systems were offline. "How did you know this would work?" Admiral Vasquez demanded as they ran. Lyra, breathless but still composed, explained between gasps. "My grandmother wasn't just teaching me songs. She was teaching me the old ways of using sound. When I was assigned as your aide, I studied the Concordat's technology. Their systems are based on crystalline structures that respond to specific frequencies that happen to match certain traditional Navajo songs." "That's impossible," Dr. Reynolds interrupted. "The mathematical coincidence would be—" "Not coincidence," Lyra corrected. "Convergent evolution. The universe speaks in patterns. My ancestors recognized some of them. The Concordat discovered others. I just found the overlap. Their escape route led them to a maintenance bay where smaller vessels were docked. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of recovery as the Concordat forces regrouped. They wouldn't have long before pursuit began in earnest. Ambassador Okafor looked at the available ships with dismay. "None of us can pilot these alien craft." "We don't need to," Admiral Vasquez said, activating her emergency beacon at last. "We just need to hold this position for 7 minutes." Commander Washington had already taken up a defensive position at the bay entrance. "That's going to be a problem," she reported, pointing at the approaching security drones that seemed to have overcome their initial malfunction. "Those 7 minutes are going to cost us." The drones moved with precision, their weapons trained on the humans. Behind them marched a contingent of Vex Talon's personal guard. "Lyra," the Admiral said quietly, "can you sing again?" The young woman shook her head. "Not effectively. They're already adapting their systems to filter out my vocal patterns." Dr. Reynolds stepped forward unexpectedly. "But they can't filter out all of us at once." The others turned to him in surprise. The xenobiologist had always been the quietest member of their delegation, more comfortable with alien biology than with human interaction. "What do you mean?" Lyra asked. "Teach us the pattern," he said. "Quickly. The mathematical sequence in your song. If we all produce different parts of it simultaneously." Understanding dawned on Lyra's face. A human choir. They wouldn't be prepared for that complexity. Without waiting for further discussion, she began to hum a simple pattern, then gestured for Dr. Reynolds to repeat it. She moved to Commander Washington, giving her a different sequence, then to the ambassador and finally the admiral, creating a 5-part harmony. As the drones reached the threshold of the maintenance bay, the 5 humans began to sing not the same notes, but complementary patterns that interacted with each other and with the crystalline architecture of the station itself. The effect was more dramatic than anyone could have anticipated. The drones didn't simply malfunction. They began to resonate with the human voices, their programming completely overwhelmed. The armed guards behind them stumbled, their neural implants overloaded by the complex harmonics. And throughout the station, something even more remarkable was happening. The humans couldn't see it, but every communication system within the Concordat headquarters was now broadcasting their improvised chorus to all member worlds, along with the evidence of Vex Talon's conspiracy. 7 minutes later, exactly as Admiral Vasquez had predicted, the maintenance bay's exterior doors opened. But it wasn't a human rescue ship that appeared in the opening. It was an entire delegation of the Concordate's inner council, led by Archon Petix. Humans, the crystalline entity announced. The Concordate requests a formal parley. It seems we have misjudged your species. The 5 humans exchanged glances, their song fading as they saw that the armed guards had lowered their weapons. Even the drones had retreated, hovering at a respectful distance. We accept your request for parley, Admiral Vasquez replied cautiously, provided the safety of my team is guaranteed. Archon Petix's facets shifted in what might have been a nod. You have revealed a conspiracy that threatened the very foundation of the Concordat. Sovereign Vextalon has been detained, and his co-conspirators are being identified. Your safety is assured. Dr. Reynolds was staring at the crystalline being with scientific fascination. Your entire communications network broadcast our song, he said. Was that deliberate on your part? No, admitted the Archon. It was an unexpected consequence of your harmonic patterns interacting with our systems. But it proved fortuitous. The evidence could not be suppressed or denied. The full council has voted to remove Vextalon from power and to formally apologize to Earth for the false accusations. Ambassador Okafor stepped forward, slipping naturally into his diplomatic role. We appreciate the apology, but we must discuss the larger issue. The myriad collective fleet that was meant to take advantage of the conflict between our civilizations is still approaching, Archon Petix confirmed grimly. And our defense systems remain compromised. Commander Washington had not relaxed her guard. Convenient timing for them. Lyra had been quiet, catching her breath after the intensity of the song. Now she spoke up. The systems aren't permanently damaged. I didn't destroy anything, I just rearranged the access patterns. The Archon's crystalline form vibrated with what might have been surprise. You claim you can restore our systems? Better than that, Lyra said. I can improve them. Admiral Vasquez looked at her sharply. Explain. The vulnerability in their systems isn't a flaw, it's an unrecognized feature, Lyra explained. Their crystalline computing architecture is actually more powerful than they realize. It's capable of processing patterns they've never used before, patterns that happen to match certain types of human music. Dr. Reynolds was nodding slowly as he followed her logic. You're saying we could upgrade their systems through song? Exactly, Lyra confirmed. But it would take more than just the 5 of us. We'd need many human voices, each carrying different parts of the pattern. Ambassador Okafor's diplomatic mind was already racing ahead. This could be the foundation for a true alliance between Earth and the Concordate. Not just a temporary truce, but a technological symbiosis. A fascinating proposal, Archon Petix acknowledged, but we have less than 3 hours before the myriad collective fleet enters our defensive perimeter. Can your enhancement be implemented so quickly? Admiral Vasquez's military training had taught her to recognize opportunities in crisis. We have a ship in orbit with over 200 crew members. If Lyra can teach them the patterns, I can, Lyra confirmed, but we'd need to broadcast through the Concordate's main communication array, and the patterns would have to be precisely modulated to match their defense systems. Archon Petix's crystalline structure flickered rapidly, their equivalent of rapid thought. This is unprecedented. You are asking us to give humans direct access to our most critical systems. We're offering to save those systems, Commander Washington countered bluntly, and possibly your entire civilization. The tension in the maintenance bay was palpable as the Archon considered the proposal. The fate of 2 civilizations hung in the balance. Very well, Archon Petix decided finally. We have little choice. The Concordate formally requests Earth's assistance in repelling the myriad collective threat. Ambassador Okafor bowed slightly. On behalf of Earth, we accept. What followed was a flurry of activity unlike anything the Concordate headquarters had ever seen. The human delegation was escorted to the station's central communication hub, where Lyra began working with Concordate technicians to prepare their systems for the harmonic enhancement. Admiral Vasquez contacted the human ship in orbit, ordering all available personnel with any musical training to prepare for Lyra's instructions. Dr. Reynolds worked with Concordate scientists to analyze the mathematical principles behind the harmonic patterns, making adjustments to maximize their effectiveness against the approaching fleet. Even Commander Washington found herself contributing. her military background proving useful in coordinating the complex logistics of the operation. Ambassador Okafor, meanwhile, drafted the formal terms of the emergency alliance, ensuring Earth's interests would be protected regardless of the outcome. As the 3-hour deadline approached, everything was finally ready. The human crew members had been taught their parts in the complex harmonic pattern, and the Concordate's communication array had been reconfigured to transmit the resulting song directly to their defense systems. In the central hub, surrounded by Concordate officials and technicians, Lyra took her position at the main. The inner council chamber was smaller than the Grand Assembly Hall, but no less impressive. Designed for confidential diplomatic negotiations, its walls shifted colors subtly, a security measure that prevented any recording technology from functioning properly. Admiral Vasquez sat across from Archon Petix, whose crystalline form reflected fractals of light across the polished table. The other humans and a select group of Concordate representatives completed the circle. Noticeably absent was Sovereign Vexus Talon, who had been detained pending investigation into the conspiracy Lyra's song had revealed. "Let us speak plainly," Archon Petix began, crystal facets realigning to focus entirely on the humans. "Your demonstration has created a complicated situation for the Concordate. You mean the exposure of a false flag operation designed to start a war with Earth?" Ambassador Okafor asked, his diplomatic training evident in his controlled tone. "Precisely," the Archon acknowledged. "But beyond that, the method of your revelation has caused significant concern among our member species." Commander Washington leaned forward. "You're worried about what else human voices might be capable of doing to your systems?" "Yes," admitted Delegate Mora, the collective consciousness entity floating like a cloud of luminescent particles above their designated position. "What we witnessed was not merely the revelation of hidden data. Your combined vocalization patterns temporarily seized control of our most secure networks." Dr. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. "An unintended consequence of your technology's fundamental architecture. You've built your systems on crystalline matrices that respond to specific harmonic frequencies that happen to occur naturally in human vocal expressions, which leads us to our current dilemma," Archon Tix continued. "Many within the Concordate now view humans not as potential allies but as an existential threat." Admiral Vasquez kept her expression neutral, though inwardly she recognized the gravity of the situation. Earth's fleet, while formidable, could not withstand the combined might of the Concordate if they decided humanity was too dangerous to include in galactic society. Lyra, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "You're approaching this all wrong." All eyes turned to her, the youngest human present, whose voice had started everything. "Continue," encouraged Delegate Urian, whose initial dismissiveness had been replaced by cautious respect. "You see our voices as weapons that can disrupt your technology," Lyra explained. "But that's like fearing fire because it can burn, while ignoring that it can also warm and illuminate." She stood and walked to the center of the chamber where a holographic display showed the Concordate's territory, millions of stars spread across the galactic arm. "These harmonics in our voices evolved for communication, for expressing emotion, for connecting with each other," she continued. "What if instead of seeing them as a threat, you saw them as an opportunity?" The holographic display flickered, responding subtly to the resonance patterns in her voice even as she spoke. "Your technology is vulnerable to our voices because there's a fundamental mathematical connection you never anticipated. But that same connection could lead to advancements neither of our civilizations could achieve alone." Dr. Reynolds caught on immediately. "She's right. The patterns in human music, they're not random. They reflect natural mathematical sequences found throughout the universe. If we shared this knowledge, you propose cooperation rather than isolation," Archon Petix stated, crystalline structure shifting to a blue-green hue that the humans couldn't interpret. "I propose more than that," Lyra said. "I propose a cultural exchange. Your people learn our music, our vocal expressions. We learn whatever art forms your species have developed. Together we create something new and fix the vulnerabilities in your systems in the process." Ambassador Okafor smiled slightly, recognizing the elegant diplomatic solution Lyra was offering, a way for the Concordate to neutralize the perceived human threat while gaining valuable knowledge. "And What does Earth gain from this arrangement? Asked Delegate Mora. Admiral Vasquez finally spoke. Protection, recognition, the chance to join galactic society, as equals rather than as curiosities or threats. The concordant representatives communicated silently among themselves through their neural network. The humans waited, aware that the future relationship between Earth and the most powerful alliance in the galaxy hung in the balance. Finally, Archon Petix's form shifted to a warm golden hue. We will bring your proposal to the full council. But first, a demonstration is required. What kind of demonstration? Commander Washington asked warily. The human, Lyra Kendrick, will work with our chief systems architect to develop a security protocol based on these harmonic principles, one that protects against the very vulnerability she exploited. All eyes turned to Lyra, who stood still in the center of the chamber, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. If she succeeds, Archon Petix continued, it will prove the sincerity of your offer and the value of this proposed exchange. And if I fail? Lyra asked quietly. The Archon's crystalline structure darkened slightly. Then the Concordat will have no choice but to classify humans as a Class 1 threat species, with all the restrictions that designation entails. The implications were clear. Quarantine, restricted travel, constant monitoring, perhaps even preemptive measures against Earth. Admiral Vasquez looked at Lyra questioningly. The young woman nodded once, accepting the challenge. She'll do it, the Admiral told the Council. When do we begin? Immediately, Archon Petix replied. The future of your species depends on how well this human truly understands the power of her voice. The next 3 days were the most intense of Lyra's life. She was escorted to the Concordat's central processing core, a vast chamber filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with data flows from across the galaxy. Here she met Nexus Prime, the chief systems architect of the Concordat. Nexus Prime was unlike any alien Lyra had encountered so far. Rather than having a physical body of matter, the being existed as organized energy patterns contained within a vaguely humanoid shape of shimmering light. Your vocal abilities are fascinating. Nexus Prime's voice resonated directly in her mind rather than through air vibrations. I have analyzed the recordings of your songs in the council chamber. The mathematical principles are unexpected. Lyra felt a momentary surge of anxiety. Working with alien technology was one thing. Creating an entirely new security protocol was quite another. But she thought of her grandmother, of the songs passed down through generations, and found her resolve. Let's start with the basics, she suggested. Show me how your systems currently process and respond to harmonic frequencies. What followed was an immersive education unlike anything possible on Earth. Nexus Prime didn't just explain the Concordat's technology. The entity translated complex multidimensional data structures into visual and auditory experiences that Lyra could comprehend. She learned that the crystalline architecture of Concordat computing was based on principles similar to quantum computing on Earth but far more advanced. Information wasn't stored in simple binary states, but in complex resonance patterns within the crystal lattices. This is why your songs affected our systems, Nexus Prime explained on the second day. Your voice created harmonic patterns that matched certain access protocols. It was as if you spoke passwords you didn't know existed. Lyra nodded, understanding blooming. And because the systems recognized the patterns as valid commands, they executed them without authentication checks. Precisely. By the third day, Lyra and Nexus Prime had developed a promising approach. Rather than trying to block harmonic patterns that matched command structures which would require limiting the system's natural responsiveness, they created a multi-layered authentication protocol. The system will still recognize the harmonic patterns, Lyra explained to Admiral Vasquez during a brief break, but it will require confirmation through multiple channels before executing commands. Like a two-factor authentication on Earth, but much more sophisticated. And this will prevent anyone from using songs to hack their systems? The Admiral asked. Not completely prevent, but make it exponentially more difficult, Lyra corrected. The beauty of it is that it doesn't sacrifice the responsiveness that makes their technology so powerful. When the time came for the demonstration, the inner council chamber was filled with representatives from all major Concordat species. The stakes couldn't be higher. The future relationship between humanity and the galactic community hung in the balance. Archon Petix addressed the assembly. The human, Lyra Kendrick, will now demonstrate the security protocol she has developed with Nexus Prime. She will first attempt to access restricted data using the method that succeeded previously, then show how the new protocol prevents such access. All eyes turned to Lyra. Standing beside a terminal interface at the center of the chamber, she took a deep breath and began to sing the same song she had used days ago to reveal Vextalon's conspiracy. The displays around the chamber flickered in response, showing that the harmonic patterns were being recognized. But instead of accessing the data directly, a series of authentication requests appeared, requiring responses from authorized users across multiple channels. The Concordate's central processing core resembled a vast cathedral built from light. Crystalline pillars rose hundreds of meters toward a domed ceiling that shimmered with data streams flowing between countless worlds. At the center stood a structure that resembled an orchestra pit, if orchestras were designed by beings who had evolved in deep space. Here, for 3 days, Lyra had worked alongside Nexus Prime, the Concordate's chief systems architect, a being whose body was a complex network of energy patterns contained within a humanoid form. "It is almost time," Nexus Prime announced, its voice a harmonic blend that reminded Lyra of electronic music. "The Council has arrived to witness the demonstration." Lyra looked up from the console where she had been programming the final sequences. Dark circles under her eyes testified to her exhaustion. Learning to interface with alien technology through voice modulation had pushed her abilities to their limits. The rest of the human delegation entered the chamber alongside the full Galactic Council, not just the Inner Council this time, but representatives from all member species. The gravity of the moment was not lost on anyone present. Admiral Vasquez caught Lyra's eye and gave a slight nod of encouragement. Dr. Reynolds looked fascinated by the processing core's architecture, while Commander Washington maintained her vigilant assessment of potential threats. Ambassador Okafor moved with the practiced ease of a diplomat, engaging several alien representatives in conversation. Archon Petix, who had temporarily assumed leadership of the Council following Vex's Talon's removal, addressed the assembly. "We gather to witness whether humans and the Concordate can forge a new path forward. The demonstration today will determine if the vulnerability revealed by human vocalization can be transformed into a strength." The Archon turned to Lyra. "Explain what you have created." "Human." Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fatigue. "What I exploited was not a flaw in your technology, but an unrecognized connection. Your crystalline computing cores respond to certain frequencies, because those frequencies are fundamental to the universe itself. What we've created is not a patch or a workaround, but a new integration." She gestured to Nexus Prime, who activated a holographic display showing the complex mathematical patterns they had developed. "This new security protocol doesn't block human vocal patterns," Lyra continued. "Instead, it incorporates them. It recognizes the difference between random noise and intentional communication." Dr. Reynolds leaned forward with sudden understanding. "You've taught the system to distinguish between speech and song, between communication and command." "Exactly," Lyra confirmed. "But for the final implementation, we need more than just my voice." She looked directly at Admiral Vasquez. "We need all of humanity's voices, or at least a representative sample." The Admiral frowned. "Explain." Nexus Prime's energy form pulsed with what might have been excitement. "The human has proposed something unprecedented. A composite security key derived from multiple human vocal patterns. Not just one voice, but many, creating harmonies that cannot be replicated. A choir," Ambassador Okafor realized, "just like we did during our escape. But much more complex," Lyra said. "What I'm proposing is a symphony. Human voices from different cultures, ages, and vocal ranges, combined in patterns that represent not just mathematical sequences, but the full range of human expression." Delegate Urian's tentacles curled skeptically. "And this will secure our systems against future exploitation?" "It will do more than that," Lyra promised. "It will create a bridge between our species. The security protocol will require periodic updating with new human vocal patterns, an ongoing cultural exchange that benefits both sides." The council members communicated silently among themselves, evaluating the proposal. Finally, Archon Pedic spoke. Demonstrate this system with the humans present today. If it functions as you claim, we will consider your larger proposal. Lyra nodded and turned to her fellow humans. Remember the patterns I taught you during our escape? We'll use those as a foundation, but this time I need you to infuse them with genuine emotion. What kind of emotion? Commander Washington asked pragmatically. Whatever you feel most strongly right now, Lyra answered. This isn't just about mathematical patterns anymore. It's about what makes human expression unique in the galaxy. The 5 humans formed a circle at the center of the processing core. Nexus Prime activated the interface Lyra had designed, and the crystalline pillars surrounding them began to glow with anticipated resonance. Lyra began first, her clear voice providing the foundation, a Navajo healing song that spoke of harmony between living things. Dr. Reynolds joined next, his baritone adding depth with a pattern based on prime numbers. Commander Washington's alto provided counterpoint, while Ambassador Okafor added a rhythm derived from traditional African drumming patterns. Finally, Admiral Vasquez joined in, her voice hesitant at first, then growing in confidence. She sang a lullaby her mother had sung to her as a child, something she hadn't thought about in decades. As the 5 human voices blended together, the processing core responded. The crystalline pillars pulsed with light that matched their harmonies. Data streams flowing through the cathedral-like space began to reorganize themselves, creating new patterns that incorporated the human vocal elements. The alien representatives watched in stunned silence as their most sophisticated technology entered into what could only be described as a duet with the human voices, and then something unexpected happened. Nexus Prime, moved by what it was witnessing, added its own harmonic voice to the human choir. The energy being's contribution created a bridge between the human expressions and the concordant technology, completing the circuit in ways Lyra hadn't even anticipated. The entire chamber resonated with the combined harmony, human, alien, and technological elements all in perfect balance. When the song finally ended, there was a moment of profound silence. Archon Petix's crystalline form had shifted to a color no human had seen before, a hue that seemed to contain all possible colors simultaneously. In all the history of the Concordat, the Archon said finally, we have never witnessed such integration between biological expression and technological response. Nexus Prime stepped forward. The security protocol is now active. I can confirm it is functioning at 99.8% efficiency, far beyond our projections. And the remaining 0.2%? Delegate Mora inquired. That represents the space for growth, Lyra explained, smiling despite her exhaustion. Room for new human voices to be added, new expressions to be incorporated. The protocol is designed to evolve, just as our species do. Admiral Vasquez addressed the council directly. This demonstration proves what we've proposed, that human expression is not a threat to be contained, but a new perspective that can strengthen the Concordat. Archon Petix conferred briefly with the other council members before rendering judgment. The Galactic Concordat accepts your proposal. Humans of Earth. We will establish a formal cultural exchange program, beginning with this security protocol implementation. Earth will be granted provisional membership status while the details are finalized. A murmur of approval, expressed in various alien ways, rippled through the assembly. Ambassador. Okafor stepped forward to handle the diplomatic formalities, but Lyra remained where she stood in the center of the processing core, watching the light patterns that still flowed in rhythm with the echoes of human voices. Nexus Prime approached her. Your song has changed everything, the energy being observed. Not just prevented a war, but opened possibilities none of us had considered. Lyra nodded thoughtfully. That's the thing about human expression that your people didn't understand. It's not just noise or primitive communication. What is it then? Nexus Prime asked. Lyra looked up at the Cathedral of Light, where human voices now flowed alongside alien data streams, creating something entirely new in the galaxy. It's how we connect, she said simply, with each other, with our past, with our future, and now with you. Throughout the Concordat's vast network, the echoes of human song continued to resonate, carrying a message that no translation matrix was needed to understand. A new harmony had begun, 6 months later, the Cultural Exchange Center on Earth's moon had become the most visited location in the solar system. Thousands of representatives from concordate species arrived daily to participate in what had become known as the Harmonic Integration Project. Inside the main auditorium, 100 human vocalists from diverse cultural backgrounds performed alongside alien musicians, using instruments no human had imagined before first contact. The resulting compositions were not just artistic collaborations but practical applications. Each performance refined the security protocols, protecting the joint Earth Concordate defense network. Lyra watched from a balcony, overlooking the performance, her official badge identifying her as Director, Harmonic Integration Project. Beside her stood Nexus Prime, who had requested permanent assignment to Earth as the Concordate's technical liaison. The Myriad Collective has withdrawn their forces from our borders, the energy being informed her. Our intelligence suggests they were unprepared for the level of integration between our civilizations. Good news, Lyra replied, though her expression remained thoughtful. But they'll be back. They'll find new ways to attack the harmonics,